This is a CNN journalist, and he's so angry because he's in Cuba, okay? And there's a Russian warship that's just docked in Cuba.
This naval ship, it's right over my shoulder. It's a Russian warship here in the harbor in Havana. And what's it doing about 90 miles from the United States? Well, that may have to do with the war in Ukraine, because Cuba is one of the few countries that is increasingly defending Russia's invasion of Ukraine, saying it is NATO's fault, not Russia's. And Russia has responded by sending Cuba oil, food, even promising to build beachside hotels. Cuban officials have said that they would like to have good relations with the United States, but they, like Russia, are under U.S. economic sanctions. And meanwhile, Russia is coming and offering them this economic assistance. So really, for Cuba, it's an easy choice.
What? Okay, forget his analysis. You can just crumple that and throw it in the trash, if you can even call that analysis, what that verbal diarrhea just was. What I find so funny is he's so angry that what is this Russian warship doing 90 miles from the U.S. coast, right? And then he says it has something to do with the war in Ukraine. And I the first time I watched this, I was like, oh my God, maybe he gets it. He finally gets it. Yes. What does it have in common with the war in Ukraine? What does it have in common? And he was almost over the line. He almost got there. It's just a resounding sigh. What a buffoon. Just hand in, I mean, journalists don't have badges, they have press cards, but just hand it in, man. You're not fit for this job. You're not fit for this job. The only thing that this has, this has to do with the war in Ukraine is that this person and his entire network, CNN, are hypocrites. He's saying, what's this doing 90 miles from the U.S. coast? Yeah, well, guess what? The Russians would also like to know what your tanks are doing. Not 90 miles from the Russian border, on the Russian border. They're on the Russian border. From the Russians' point of view, they annexed these 4 regions, right? So it's Russia. It's not. I know that for the United States, this is occupied Ukraine, and they make sure to tell you that word, right? When they move on to the Israeli segment, if they even have one, mysteriously that word disappears. But from the Russians' point of view, do you think he'll ever be able to answer this question? I don't think he'd even ask it in the first place. What an utter buffoon. His explanation of why this ship is there is Russia is giving Cuba oil. What? This ship is there for 5 days and then it's leaving. Anyone can walk onto the ship now. It's just docked there for of course, to send a message, but it's open to the public. People can tour it. It's not there because the Cubans will allow the Russians to build hotels. It's nothing to do with hotels. They're going to lease land for up to 30 years. Having seen what happened in Guantanamo Bay, I think this is a bad idea. But obviously, one would hope the Russians won't open a torture base there like the Americans. I don't think they will. It's true that Russians are sending more oil to Cuba now since the end of the Cold War, right? So today in 2023, there's more Russian oil being sent to Cuba since 1991. It's true that the Russians are reforging and rekindling alliances. Obviously Iran and Russia have a very good relationship. That relationship has deepened. Those ties have been strengthened since the war in Ukraine began. That's correct, right? And you can say the same about Cuba, right? Ties being reforged or strengthened or deepened again. Yes, that's fine. But I just find this guy's hypocrisy, it's so blunt. It's like, even did you catch this in the beginning on his TikTok? It says Russian warship spotted in unusual place. How can you get so close and still miss? How can you get so close and still miss? Do you think he'll say the same thing about Western weapons? And yes, they'll give you all this crap about, Russia invaded Ukraine and all this crap. Really? Russia invaded Ukraine in 2008? What happened in 2008 for George Bush and NATO to say we want Ukraine? What excuse do you have now? What the fuck was happening in 2008? What? 2008? Forget 2014. 2014 isn't even on their timeline, but you could still go there. 2014, right? NATO, they really start training the Ukrainians. And right now, even though Ukraine is doing, like I said, this counteroffensive of theirs is doesn't exist, never materialized. They are the toughest army in Europe right now. The Germans and the Americans who are training them have less combat experience than the Ukrainians. Okay, so that, I think that says a lot. The only reason that they're training them is for specific applications, you know, how to operate this specific machine, etc. So it's not even, these are not, you know, fresh recruits who are showing up to be trained by the United States or Germany or whatever. Yeah, again, this is a different matter. You know, my point still stands that this is just, it's not blunt force. It's hypocrisy, you know, on another level. Jesus Christ, do you think he'd get it by now? No. They're funny. They're really funny, these guys.